Have you ever thought about the purpose of your family being together? It's incredible how family connections can unfold in unexpected ways. My name is Ruth. I'm a 32-year-old homemaker, living with my husband Samuel and our 3-year-old daughter Jessica. However, recently, Samuel's father passed away. Samuel said,
"Leaving Mom to live alone would be unfair. I should live with her."
With these thoughts, we were forcibly relocated to our in-laws' house. The place is surrounded by vegetable gardens, providing a natural environment suitable for raising Jessica. However, the house is quite old and needs repairs in various areas. Despite being only 65 years old, Samuel's mother insists she can live alone without any health issues. Nevertheless, Samuel insisted on moving to his parents' home. Before we knew it, Samuel's sister Melissa also decided to live there, saying,
"It wouldn't be right to leave Mom's care solely to Samuel. I'll live here too."
Melissa had initially talked about taking care of her mother, but in reality, she didn't contribute to household chores at all. She pushed everything onto me. Melissa works part-time and has been divorced, lived alone until now. She wanted to return to her parents' home, but apparently, her father didn't allow it while he was alive. According to their mother, Melissa's infidelity caused the divorce, and their angry father forbade her from returning to the family home. Now that their father has passed away, Melissa finally returned, regardless of whether Samuel and I live there too. She probably intended to take care of her mother, but with our presence, she conveniently leaves the household tasks to me. Melissa thought the part-time income alone made it difficult to pay the rent, but living with the in-laws meant no rent, and perhaps Samuel would cover expenses like food. Melissa, having moved in, soon demanded,
"Since my part-time pay is low, Samuel will take care of my living expenses too. I'll do the housework, so that should be fine, right?"
However, she barely did any housework, occasionally cleaning the entrance. Samuel, seemingly unable to stand up to Melissa, didn't complain or ask for living expenses, and instead, the mother-in-law used her pension to cover Melissa's costs. I couldn't agree with this, so I told the mother-in-law, "You don't have to pay. We'll manage with Samuel's salary," but she replied,
"Don't worry about it. I'm using the survivor's pension from my late husband, so it's fine."
The kind-hearted mother-in-law just smiled. The mother-in-law, truly gentle and submissive, allowed Samuel and Melissa to do as they pleased. Samuel, even before moving in, rarely cared for Jessica, and after the move, stopped helping with childcare altogether. On holidays, he'd go out, leaving Jessica without playtime. The mother-in-law filled in, so Jessica wasn't lonely, but I worried about her feelings towards Samuel. Even after work on weekdays, he'd go drinking with Melissa, reducing Jessica's time with him. I was concerned about their relationship and also worried about his finances, given his frequent outings. Melissa has recently stopped going to her part-time job and sleeps until noon every day, then goes out drinking with Samuel at night. It doesn't affect our household finances since she doesn't contribute, but the thought of Samuel paying for all the drinks is frightening. If Samuel, who isn't a high earner, is paying for Melissa's share as well, his salary will quickly deplete. Feeling unsettled, I decided to organize a birthday party for Jessica as a distraction since her birthday was approaching. Jessica and my mother-in-law were thrilled, but Samuel was not enthusiastic. Samuel said,
"Do we really need to have a birthday party now?"
Melissa also disapproved, saying,
"Birthdays happen every year. There's no need to make a fuss."
Annoyed by Samuel lounging around the house, I asked, "If you're free, could you go shopping? I'll give you the money, please." He reluctantly began to prepare for shopping. Seeing this, Melissa said,
"I'm bored at home too, so I'll go with him,"
and followed Samuel out. After a while, Samuel called my smartphone, but I was cooking and couldn't answer. Jessica, who had always wanted to use the smartphone, took it to my mother-in-law and started fiddling with it. My mother-in-law tried to answer in haste. Jessica accidentally turned on the speaker, and it seemed they answered the call. I rushed over to them, and Samuel, thinking the smartphone was malfunctioning and not connected, began talking to Melissa on the other end. Samuel said,
"Ruth isn't answering the phone. The money she gave isn't enough. What should we do?"
It seemed he thought the call had disconnected, and Melissa responded as usual. Melissa said,
"Speaking of money, should we carry out that plan we joked about before? We've already spent the inheritance from Dad, and now it's time for Mom to go to the other world, isn't it?"
I was shocked by such a raw statement, but my mother-in-law calmly used the smartphone's recording function to document Samuel and Melissa's conversation. Unaware of this, Samuel said,
"How are we going to make it look like an accident? Push her down the stairs or something?"
I thought such extreme statements were not for children's ears, so I took Jessica to the kitchen. My mother-in-law listened to their conversation with a grave expression. Oblivious Melissa said,
"Wouldn't it be best if she got run over by a car? If it's a car, we can also get auto insurance. No mistake."
She spoke of such a terrifying plan nonchalantly, laughing. Eventually, their conversation shifted to a different topic, so my mother-in-law stopped the recording and ended the call, but she was red with anger, a stark contrast to her usually calm demeanor. I felt anger, but more than that, I was at a loss for how to face Samuel and Melissa when they returned, contemplating taking their own mother's life. I was too scared to interact with them as usual, and the thought of living with such people filled me with anxiety. It seemed I had turned pale without realizing it.
"Mom, what's wrong? Your face is all white."
Jessica pointed it out. In a panic, I forced a smile, but I started to think it would be better to leave this house for Jessica's sake. I contacted the police immediately, but they said the evidence was too weak to establish a case for attempted murder. They didn't take it seriously, saying it was a domestic matter. My mother-in-law seemed to understand my thoughts.
Leave the rest to me. You and Jessica should lead this place. I'll contact your parents, so start preparing to leave. I can't let you and precious Jessica stay with such dangerous people."
Her tone was stern, though her face had returned to its gentle expression. As instructed by my mother-in-law, I began packing to leave the in-laws' house.
"What about my birthday party?"
She asked, looking sad, so I reassured her. "We're going to celebrate with your grandparents at Mom's house because they want to celebrate with you too." Convinced that my parents also wanted to celebrate, Jessica looked relieved. After a while, Samuel and Melissa, who knew nothing, returned.
"I didn't buy anything because there wasn't enough money."
Samuel shouted angrily. Melissa followed up.
"It was a wasted trip, but you still owe me for my time. My hourly rate is high, so you owe me about $100.
She said something ridiculous. To them, my mother-in-law said,
"Stop talking nonsense and sit down. I have something to tell you."
Even as they smirked and joked, My mother-in-law ordered sternly.
Just sit down and be quiet.
She seemed genuinely angry, shouting at Samuel and Melissa in a voice I had never heard before. Samuel and Melissa, realizing something was wrong, sat down quietly in front of her, and then my mother-in-law called out to me.
Ruth, please join us for this conversation. And could you lend me your smartphone?
I let Jessica play by herself and sat next to my mother-in-law, setting up my smartphone so that the recording of Samuel and Melissa's conversation could be played immediately. Samuel and Melissa, unaware that their conversation had been recorded, looked complacent. But when they heard their own scheming from my smartphone, they were so shocked they almost jumped.
Why did you record that? When did you install a hidden microphone?
Samuel stood up, making a scene. Melissa, with wide eyes.
Isn't this the conversation we had when we went shopping?
She screamed but couldn't say anything more. To the astonished pair, my mother-in-law said,
Jessica answered Samuel's phone, but you thought the call was answered, did you? But the call was connected the whole time, so I was able to record all of your plotting. Planning to send your own mother to the afterlife under the guise of an accident. Isn't that a bit too much like a drama? And what about the two of you living such a degenerate life? Samuel, you come home every night from drinking and push all the housework and childcare onto Ruth. And Melissa, have you quit your part-time job? Just lazing around without working.
She exposed their misdeeds and continued to scold them. Melissa quickly made excuses.
I never thought of doing such a thing to Mother. It was Samuel who suggested making it look like an accident, and I tried to stop him. Samuel is the bad one.
She shifted the blame onto Samuel. Samuel, pointing at Melissa.
It was you who came up with the plan. I wasn't keen on it, but you pushed ahead so forcefully that I reluctantly agreed. You're the bad one.
They began to blame each other, and both my mother-in-law and I sighed in dismay. My mother-in-law's anger seemed to grow.
I don't want things to go your way, so I'm going back to my parents' house. You two can do as you please. I'll have Ruth and Jessica leave this place too.
She spoke coldly. Samuel and Melissa, who had been blaming each other just moments ago, suddenly looked cheerful. Samuel exclaimed with joy.
What? Mom, Ruth and Jessica are leaving? Then this house is mine.
To which Melissa shouted back with a smile.
What are you talking about? Half of it is mine.
After their plan to kill their mother was exposed, and fearing how much they would be scolded, the two of them became ecstatic at her unexpected announcement. It seemed they didn't care about my going back to my parents' house either, as I left the noisy Samuel behind and took Jessica out of the in-laws' house. My mother-in-law seemed sad to part with Jessica.
Don't forget about your grandma, okay?
She said with tears in her eyes. Jessica, still not fully understanding the situation, asked.
Is Grandma going somewhere? Too?
I reassured my mother-in-law. Don't worry, once things settle down, I'll definitely bring Jessica to visit. But something was bothering me, so I asked my mother-in-law. Is it really okay to hand over this house and land to Samuel and his sister? They were planning something so terrible, weren't they? To my angry question, my mother-in-law replied with a smile.
This area is a city planning zone, so they can't just sell the land, and the house isn't livable without repairs. I'm not at all upset about giving this house and land to those two. The property tax is high, and it's been a problem. They'll be the ones regretting it once they find out the truth.
My parents warmly welcomed Jessica and me when we returned home. It seems my mother-in-law had also contacted them.
I heard from Samuel's mother about the situation. Such terrible people. You should divorce that man right away.
My father said angrily. My mother, holding Jessica, added,
It's pitiful for Jessica to have such a person as a father.
She seemed unable to contain her anger. A few days later, when I went back to my in-laws' house to collect the rest of my belongings.
Did you know this land couldn't be sold? The real estate agent told me it can't be developed into residential land, so it can't be sold. We can't get any cash this way.
Samuel yelled. And Melissa also started shouting.
It's all your fault, Ruth. This happened because you asked us to go shopping.
Their faces turned from joy to near tears. Moreover, the day we left, the wind was so strong that part of the roof was torn off, making the house unlivable. The two of them, now without the reliable mother-in-law to turn to for repairs, were helpless. You can't expect to treat your family with such disregard and still receive an inheritance properly. Take responsibility for the trouble you've caused, I said, and then I thrust the divorce papers at Samuel and made him sign. Afterward, Samuel and Melissa had to live in the broken house while repaying their debts. They had accumulated debt believing they would inherit a large sum from the mother-in-law, and it seemed impossible to manage on Samuel's earnings alone, especially since Melissa apparently had no intention of working. From the damaged house, the sound of their quarreling could be heard echoing. Having returned to my parents' home, I was approached by the company I worked for before giving birth and started working again. With my parents taking care of Jessica, I could work with peace of mind. My mother-in-law has been in touch, so Jessica and I go to visit her. Jessica missed her grandmother but didn't say anything about not seeing Samuel, making me realize that the child indeed watches adults closely.
How did you like this story? Please remember to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story.
Mom, please, help me.
My daughter, who had just gotten married 3 months ago, suddenly came to me in the middle of the night. What happened? When I looked at her, her face was swollen and covered in bruises. I was at a loss for words at the sight of my transformed daughter. Then, hearing her story, I trembled with anger. Unforgivable. Was it a lie that he would make my daughter happy? And I swore revenge on those who had done this to my precious daughter. I am Genesis, 50 years old. I divorced when my only daughter, Madeline, was still young, and I raised her on my own while working full-time. Madeline is not the outgoing type, but she is strong-willed and hard-working. Through steady effort, she managed to get a job at the company she had always admired. Her presence encouraged me, and I kept moving forward even during tough times. So, when she told me,
There's someone I want you to meet,
my heart was filled with joy. She introduced me to Liam, a man 7 years older than her who worked at a client company. He looked handsome in his suit and greeted me cheerfully, appearing serious and sincere.
I came here today to ask for your permission to marry Madeline.
However, after a brief introduction, he suddenly said this. Madeline was only 23 years old, and I learned that she had only been dating Liam for about 6 months. I was expecting to be introduced to her boyfriend, so I was honestly taken aback. Well, you both are still young, so maybe it's too early to think about the future? I gently admonished them, but he straightened his posture and looked me straight in the eye.
I can't think of anyone else but Madeline. I believe I will never meet another woman as wonderful as her.
With a serious expression, he passionately conveyed how much he cared for Madeline.
Liam. I feel the same way. Mom, please. Allow us to get married.
If you both are so determined, then I will support you. I was moved by his passionate feelings, and with Madeline's words, I approved of their union.
Genesis, thank you! I will definitely make Madeline happy.
Seeing Madeline and him looking at each other happily, I couldn't help but smile. Yet, after Liam left, I couldn't fully rejoice in their marriage, and a feeling of unease arose. Is this really okay? Isn't it too soon for them to get married? But I heard that every parent has mixed feelings when their child gets married, and honestly, I thought Madeline's marriage was still far in the future. Surely, it's just that I wasn't mentally prepared. They looked so happy, so it must be fine. After that, the meeting with Liam's parents went smoothly, and the discussions about the wedding progressed well. Both Liam and Madeline are only children. Liam's parents, James and Caroline, who had always wanted a daughter, seemed to be very fond of Madeline. Madeline said,
Mom, I think I'll live with Liam's parents after we get married.
While it was nice to be loved, it was actually Liam's parents who suggested living together. Are you sure? I've heard that living with in-laws can be tough. Madeline replied,
James and Caroline are very kind, and with Liam around, I have nothing to worry about.
Well, if it's you, Madeline, I'm sure you'll manage. Madeline had always been straightforward and loved by her elders, so I believed she would do well. Besides, Liam's parents' house was only a 20-minute drive from mine, so I felt reassured knowing I could quickly get there if needed. The wedding went off without a hitch, and Madeline's new life at her in-laws' house began. I thought she would be enthusiastic and doing well, but about a month after she got married, things started to change. The daily messages from Madeline stopped coming, and even when I sent her messages, she rarely replied. I didn't want to interfere too much with Madeline's married life, but I was worried, so I decided to call her. Liam answered the phone.
Oh, Genesis, what's up?
Can I speak to Madeline?
She's in the bath right now. She's doing well, so don't worry.
His tone was gentle but firm, and I ended the call without hearing Madeline's voice. After that, I didn't receive any messages or calls from Madeline. I'll just go see her. Caroline had told me to visit any time, so I decided to visit Madeline's in-laws' house that weekend. Caroline answered the intercom and said, somewhat curtly, that Madeline and Liam were out. I'm sorry for coming unannounced. When will they be back? She sighed deeply and said,
You should have called ahead. I don't know when they'll be back.
I thought she was right, so I had no choice but to leave. I wondered if I was worrying too much, but I couldn't shake the bad feeling, especially since Liam and Caroline's attitudes seemed different compared to before the wedding. After much deliberation, I decided to call Madeline's workplace just to hear her cheerful voice. To my shock, they told me she had already resigned and that her sudden departure had caused problems. Madeline quit her job? That can't be true. When she received the job offer from her dream company, we both cried tears of joy. Madeline had been so enthusiastic about balancing work and household chores like I did, so I couldn't believe she would quit suddenly. Something is definitely wrong. But what should I do? I wasn't sure if visiting her in-laws again would allow me to see Madeline, and I was even considering consulting the police when the incident happened. 2 days after learning about Madeline's resignation, it was late at night. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Who could it be at 2 a.m.? Feeling suspicious, I cautiously peeked at the intercom screen. It was too dark to see clearly, but the figure looked like Madeline. I rushed to the door and hurriedly opened it. What happened at this hour? I've been worried since I couldn't reach you. Madeline said.
Mom, I'm sorry.
I was relieved to see her, but the next moment, I was speechless. Madeline's face was swollen beyond recognition, and her body was covered in bruises. What happened to you? How did you end up like this? Madeline, trembling and crying, started to speak haltingly after a while.
Well, you see.
She began to tell her story in a choked voice. After the wedding, Liam's attitude changed drastically. He said,
Since you came as a bride, you should serve us.
And treated her like a slave. Liam and his parents were responsible for her current state. I had suspected as much when she fled to my house, but hearing the details made me tremble with anger. Madeline said,
I didn't want to trouble you, Mom. I'm sorry.
Seeing her sobbing, I felt a surge of desire for revenge against them. I want to make them suffer in hell. I vowed never to forgive Liam and his parents, who had promised to make Madeline happy but ended up hurting her so much. First, I let Madeline rest and waited for dawn to confront her in-laws. The next morning, I took her to the hospital for treatment. After that, we drove to their house. As expected, her in-laws were in an uproar when they realized Madeline was missing. James shouted.
So you took her away?
Realizing it was me at the door, James yelled angrily. Can you explain why Madeline is in this condition? I questioned him firmly, undeterred by his reaction. Next to me was Madeline, her face still swollen and her wounds covered with gauze. Seeing her, they let us in, perhaps worried about the neighbors. The three of them showed a moment of hesitation but soon revealed their true colors. Caroline glared at Madeline and said,
I just disciplined her a bit because she wasn't working properly.
Laughing scornfully. What are you saying? And Liam, didn't you promise to make her happy? Liam replied,
Well, that's only if she fulfills her duties as a wife. But she was too focused on her job, so I submitted her resignation for her.
Madeline hadn't quit her job voluntarily. Liam had submitted the resignation without her consent. By the time she realized it, it was too late, she tearfully explained. It was because he didn't like that she was coming home later than him due to her busy work schedule. Madeline was so happy to work at her dream company and was doing her best. Liam retorted,
That's not my problem. If she can't balance both, she has to quit, right?
Liam acted as if he was completely blameless. James added,
My son is right. The other day, It took her an hour to make dinner. She can't do anything properly.
James joined in, and Madeline muttered,
That's terrible.
while trembling. Then why don't you help her, Caroline? But Caroline, crossing her arms, said in a strong tone,
When I became a bride, I was made to do everything and told to learn by doing.
James chimed in.
That's right. It's a generational change. But I was watching over her properly.
They looked at each other and nodded in agreement, acting as if they had done nothing wrong. In reality, Caroline had pushed all the housework onto Madeline and did whatever she pleased. James, who had already retired and was at home, constantly monitored Madeline and interfered with everything she did. They even took her phone to prevent her from telling me about it and made sure she couldn't leave the house when I visited. And that wasn't all. Madeline believed that Liam would change and help her someday. Despite enduring the harsh treatment, the abuse from her in-laws only escalated. They made her eat leftovers and bathe in cold water, saying it was a waste of electricity. When Madeline couldn't take it anymore and complained that it was wrong, it led to the visible injuries on her body. Liam slapped her hard, calling her insolent. Caroline suggested re-educating her, and they took turns beating her with a mop. Finally, when she was released, Madeline felt her life was in danger. She waited until the three of them were asleep, then fled the house. She walked for over an hour and came to my house, barely escaping with her life. Before the marriage, you treated Madeline with care. Why have you changed so much? I can't understand, I demanded forcefully. The three of them exchanged glances and smirked. Liam said,
From the beginning, I just wanted a wife who would obey me. I thought Madeline would make a good servant.
Liam said this nonchalantly, and Caroline sighed.
She was really a disappointment.
James added,
Well, maybe she's learned her lesson from this. We could give her another chance, couldn't we?
At James' outrageous suggestion, they all burst into laughter. Madeline said,
Enough! I can't forgive you anymore.
Before I could respond, Madeline glared at the three of them and spoke out, her body trembling with anger. Liam, enraged, said,
How dare you speak to us like that?
and tried to grab Madeline. I quickly restrained him, pinning him to the floor so he couldn't move. Liam struggled, and his parents were stunned by my swift action. I never mentioned it, but I was almost an Olympic wrestler in my youth. I had to give it up due to an injury, I said, tightening my grip on Liam. Liam cried out,
Ow! Ow! Let me go!
He flailed his arms and legs, tears in his eyes. When I loosened my grip, he collapsed weakly to the floor. Pathetic! Now, who's next? I cracked my knuckles and slowly approached James and Caroline. James pleaded.
We're sorry. Please stop.
They clutched their heads and began to tremble. I sent Madeline off wishing for her happiness, and you did this to her. I will never forgive you, I shouted, and the three of them shrank back in fear. Madeline said,
Liam, I want a divorce.
Following my lead, Madeline presented the divorce papers to Liam. Liam, his face red with anger, said,
What are you talking about? I will never agree to a divorce.
"This morning, I took Madeline to the hospital and got a medical certificate for her injuries. We also filed a police report. We have nothing to hide, and we will fight this to the end," I said, looking at each of them slowly. Now, they were sweating profusely, panicking, and shouting, "Stop, please, and what about our reputation?" Madeline said,
I want a divorce as soon as possible.
Seeing them in such a state, Madeline spoke with disdain. "I look forward to seeing what happens next. You should regret what you've done." We gathered Madeline's belongings and headed for the door. Liam's pitiful voice called out,
Wait, please.
but without looking back, Madeline and I left the house confidently. After that, the divorce was finalized, and we claimed $20,000 in alimony. The police accepted our report, and the three of them were questioned. Although they were released soon after, the police visit to their house became a topic of gossip in the neighborhood, and they were shunned. As for Liam, when Madeline reported his abuse to her former colleagues, the news reached his company, and he was removed from the fast track to promotion. Meanwhile, Madeline took her time to heal both physically and emotionally at home and then started looking for a new job. As for me, my life is just beginning. I have started training to become a wrestling coach.
How did you like this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.
Impossible. I can't believe I'm going to be the mother of a handicapped person. On a holiday morning, I was enjoying a leisurely breakfast with my husband. Suddenly my sister brought her daughter, and for some reason she was unfaithful and extremely furious. No, I don't understand. What all of a sudden in the morning? Sis, raising a handicapped person takes a lot of patience. I'm at my wit's end. The sister's daughter stood quietly, crying at her mother's outburst. I will give this one to you who can't have children. Aren't you and a handicapped person who can't have children a perfect match? Don't say that. I immediately refuted her, but my sister left as if to run away. My niece was 7 years old, I believe. She probably couldn't even comprehend what was going on right now. Are you okay? Yay! Now I'm free. What? Susanna Burton, pseudonym, 30-something story. My name is Susanna Burton and I am in my 30s. I have been married for 5 years to my husband, Aaron, whom I met at work, but we have yet to have children. We both love children, and ever since we were dating, we always talked about how we wanted to have children when we got married someday. But reality is cruel. We were not able to have children as we had hoped. After talking with Aaron, we decided that we just couldn't give up on having children of our own and decided to start fertility treatments. We hoped to have just one child, no matter how much it would cost. So we went to the clinic together. However, the doctor told us that our chances of having a child were extremely low. But on the contrary, we were determined. We had done all we could do. All I want is to be with you. Let's enjoy life together. He also encouraged me by saying so. Even if we were not blessed with children in the future, we could enjoy our life together as a couple. One day, when I returned to my parents' house, my sister Caroline had also returned at the same time. She had been popular since she was a student because of her pretty looks and her good sense of humor, and now she was married and had a husband named Seth. I hadn't seen her in a while, and she was dressed in high brands. She proudly told me that Seth has taken over his parents' company and is the president. By the way, she makes fun of the fact that my husband is an ordinary company employee, and she also demeans me. My husband is now the president of the company? Well, he was always an elite. Compared to that, yours. Your husband is amazing, isn't he? But Aaron also works very hard and is very kind to me. You've always been like that, and that's why you can't do anything. I was always bothered inside, while I was appropriately malleable. It was a good thing I didn't talk back to her. By the way, I heard that you are a defective product who can't even have children. You're a useless woman, aren't you? She said mockingly while laughing at me. Caroline has always disliked me anyway. She always tries to outdo me and mount me, which frankly tires me out. She doesn't say such terrible things to me in front of my parents either. She does whatever she wants when her parents are not around. I was deeply offended by her ridicule of my infertility and left my parents' house. Why should I be talked about like that? How much did she think I had suffered because I could not have children? After that, she often pointed out to me how difficult it was for me to have children. When she meets with me, she brags about having a child herself. Even though I have always thought I understood her bad character, I could not tolerate her ridicule of my sensitive issues. She makes fun of me every time I see her like this, and her attitude gets worse and worse. Then we have no choice but to distance ourselves from her. I began to be careful not to see her as much as possible. Then one day on a holiday, many months later, the intercom suddenly rang. Suddenly, the intercom rang. My husband was off today, and he was out shopping. I was alone, doing the housework. When Aaron comes home, maybe we can go out somewhere together. I was washing dishes while thinking about that. I wondered what in the world was going on in the morning, and when I checked, to my surprise, it was Caroline. It's been a while since I've been away from here. I haven't seen her for a long time. And yet, it was her coming to me. Her face on the intercom screen was clearly unhappy, and she was standing there in front of the front door. I wonder what she wants, even though I don't want to see her. I reluctantly opened the front door. She is standing in front of me with a sullen expression on her face. It's been a long time. Oh, it's so unusual to see you here with Natalie. We don't want this handicapped person in our house. Her high-pitched voice rings out. I wonder what she is going to say as soon as she arrives, forcing Natalie, who is standing beside her, toward me. Natalie is her daughter. She is 7 years old, I think. Natalie almost fell over when she was suddenly pushed toward me. What do you mean? You just barged in all of a sudden? I stare at Caroline, who is confused and pushes the child away. She takes one look at Natalie, who is sobbing in my arms, and sighs. She is so annoying. A handicapped person who can't even speak properly doesn't deserve to be in our house. How can you use such a violent word as handicapped to your own daughter? I was at a loss for words. What do you mean she can't speak? It means exactly what it means. It's a pain in the ass. Caroline sighs heavily. You know, being a parent of a handicapped person is very, very hard. I can't do it anymore. You can't have children, so I'm going to give you one. What? You can't have children and a handicapped person is a perfect match. Get along with each other. After saying what she wanted to say as much as she wanted, she got into her car and drove away without making eye contact with her daughter. I was so stunned by what had happened that all I could do was hug Natalie. I came to my senses and looked around. I heard my sister's shrill voice echoing throughout the morning. The neighbors might come to see what was going on. I hurriedly took Natalie by the hand and led her into the house. I lock the front door and turn around. Just as I am about to comfort Natalie. Yay! Now I'm free. Natalie, having entered the house and convinced that her mother has returned, exclaims with joy. I had no idea what was going on and decided to listen to her story in the living room. It seems that Natalie has been educated very strictly to be an ideal child. She went to different classes every day and sometimes had more than one class in a day. No matter how hard she tried, she never received praise or recognition. If she failed to do as well as she wanted, she was beaten and yelled at. When she asked for help, her father was always at work, and her paternal grandparents did not pay attention to their female grandchild. Then a younger brother was born, and Natalie lost all positive attention to him. She no longer felt any affection for him, and was treated as if he was an obstacle. She was so afraid of being scolded that she finally stopped speaking in front of her mother, who mistakenly thought she had lost her ability to speak and brought her to me in a rage. When I made mistakes, they would scold me and yell at me. They wouldn't even let me eat. Natalie tells her story with a downcast look on her face. Upon closer inspection, she is emaciated and has scars on her arms and legs. It is too dangerous to send her back to her sister's house now that I have heard such a story. I let her eat her dinner for the time being. Natalie is engrossed in eating her meal. Perhaps this is the first satisfying meal she has had in a long time. How could she not give her growing child enough to eat? I think to myself as I watch her. I am the only one she can rely on right now. I was ready. Aaron returns a little later and is surprised to see Natalie at home. I immediately told him what had happened. I then told him that I wanted to take Natalie in. He too was displeased with my sister and her husband's inability to take care of their own child. He agreed to let Natalie be our child. We made an appointment later that day to meet with my sister and her husband and decided to officially adopt Natalie. Seth, too, seemed to be in the mood that as long as he had a good son, he was fine with Natalie. Seth was also in no way concerned about Natalie. Seth's parents also said that they would be better off without a girl. The adoption process was completed in no time at all. We were relieved and determined to make Natalie happy. From now on, we wanted Natalie to live a life of freedom. We would give her all the love we could, as if she were a real child. We would encourage and support her in whatever she wanted to do. After that, Natalie grew up with a carefree spirit. A few years later, she went to law school at a well-known university. We celebrated the fruit of her diligent efforts as if it were our own. One Sunday, while we were relaxing as a family, my sister and her husband suddenly barged into my house. Without even saying hello to us, they clamored for Natalie's return. I thought back to that time. The sister and her husband came to my house without permission and abandoned my little Natalie as if she were an object. They must have heard somewhere that Natalie had gone to a prestigious university, even though they had never heard from her before. I can't believe they would say that now. Apparently, Natalie's younger brother, who they thought was brilliant, had dropped out of high school. Perhaps they was strictly doing the same kind of intrusive education that they used to do to Natalie in the past. If they were tied down so tightly, any child would lose motivation for everything, not just studying. I had originally heard that Natalie's brother was a recluse and had refused to go to school in middle school. We don't want that socially inept child in our house. Natalie, come home. Upon learning that Natalie had been admitted to a difficult university, my sister and her husband came to pick her up. How could they come to pick up their daughter, whom they once called handicapped and discarded, for their own convenience? Children are not their parents' property or toys. I was deeply offended by their unmanageable behavior. Since that moment when we decided to raise Natalie as our own child, we had given her our wholehearted love. Aaron, who had raised her as his own daughter, also covered Natalie's back and refused to let her go. The two of them continued to fuss at the door that they were Natalie's parents. They were no longer getting anywhere, and just when I thought they were. My parents are Aaron and Susanna. You are not my parents. Natalie stared at my sister and her husband with a serious look in her eyes. When she clearly refused, the sister and her husband left, leaving her with the discarded words that they would take legal action. Later that day, the sister and her husband hired a lawyer to try to pretend that Natalie's adoption had never happened. However, at that time we had followed the official procedure and adopted Natalie. Therefore, they could not dissolve the adoption. In addition, Natalie, who was 7 years old at the time, still bore the scars of violence that we called discipline, and she was much thinner than the norm. I have a medical certificate in my possession that states that she was probably abused. I showed the medical certificate to my sister and her husband, who were going to court, and asked them if they were still going to court. Seth, who had taken over his parents' company and was now the president, declined to go to trial for fear of bad publicity. They are the kind of couple who would even abandon their own child out of concern for the world. There was no way they could go to court with the evidence of their abuse in front of them. But somewhere along the way, a rumor began to circulate that Natalie, Seth's eldest daughter, had been adopted, as if she had been abused and abandoned. The rumor spread quickly, and the stock price of Seth's company dropped dramatically. Soon after, Seth was removed from his position as president of the company in order to take responsibility for his actions. My sister and her husband then disappeared. Natalie's younger brother, who was left alone, was taken in by Seth's relatives, passed his tests, and attended college. Natalie successfully graduated from college and got a job at the company she wanted. She married a man she met at work. We were sad to see her go, but wished her a long and happy life as she left our home with her husband and wife. What did you think of this story? Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video. My name is Remy, a 45-year-old part-time housewife. Despite being exhausted from work and household chores every day, life was fulfilling. However, recently, my husband Taylor has been cold towards me, making me wonder if I did something wrong. Additionally, our 20-year-old college student son, Pashik, also stopped talking to me, making me think it's another phase of rebellion. Even though my son had become a well-behaved and good child after his rebellious phase, he's now treating me coldly at this age. So, even when I'm at home, I couldn't find peace or relaxation. One day, my husband and son expressed their desire to go mountain climbing.
I was part of the Young Wonderful Club in my youth, and outdoor activities seem to be popular again. I want to start mountain climbing to improve my health. Sounds cool. I'm interested in that too. The food at the summit must be delicious, right? Remy, want to come along?
Eh?
Well, I wouldn't mind taking you along, haha.
Sure. I felt a bit happy thinking my husband was being kind to me after a long time. Although I wasn't very knowledgeable about mountain climbing, I thought it could be a way to relieve stress, so I decided to give it a try. However, on the day of the mountain climbing, I suddenly couldn't go due to work. As a result, my husband and son went on their own. They planned to climb the mountain for a day and descend for another day. However, even after 3 or 4 days, they didn't return. Then, I received a call on my smartphone from my in-laws. My mother-in-law, furious, shouted at me. Where are they right now? They should have descended from the mountain already. Eh? Because of you, our son and grandchild became missing. What have you done? You invited them for mountain climbing, didn't you? The one who invited them was my husband. I considered going, but, in fact, I couldn't due to work. What? So, I didn't go. I'm at home right now. What does that mean? Why are you at home now? Well, suddenly I got called for work, and I couldn't go. So, I asked them to go without me. I finished work and just came back now. Huh? But they said they would stop by here once they descended from the mountain. I prepared a lot of food waiting for them. Don't complicate things. I thought something had happened. Oh, but maybe they're not on the mountain. Maybe they're somewhere else. Huh? What do you mean by that? Maybe overseas. When I was cleaning the room earlier, I noticed that my husband and son's passports were missing. What? My mother-in-law was quite surprised and raised her voice. I also noticed earlier while cleaning that my husband and son's passports were missing, so I just thought they might be overseas. But even if they went somewhere, where could it be? If my husband and son went overseas, I became curious about their purpose. It would be fine if it were just a trip, but why did they mention mountain climbing? It might be some kind of camouflage, and if that's the case, there must be some suspicious reason. I wondered if they were planning something dangerous and were going to escape. However, I couldn't believe that my husband and son would do such a thing. A week passed, and still, my husband and son didn't return. It's summer vacation for my son at university, but my husband should have work. I wondered how they could be away from home for such a long time. Of course, I filed a missing persons report with the police, but they couldn't be found. Maybe they've become missing for real. But where could they be? If I had gone with them, this wouldn't have happened, would it? What should I do? Despite being treated coldly, my concern for my dear husband and son didn't change, and I couldn't stop worrying. Even while working, I found my mind constantly occupied with thoughts of my husband and son, making it difficult to focus. As a surgeon, if I lose concentration, it could lead to medical mistakes. Every time before surgery, I had to gather my strength, holding back the urge to cry. On that day, I couldn't go because there was an emergency surgery. If that surgery hadn't come up, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Because I'm a surgeon, I couldn't help but think my husband and son might be in a dangerous situation. It felt like my chest was about to burst. One day, I heard a strange story from a friend. It was such an outrageous tale that my eyes nearly popped out. I got angry, thinking, those idiots. What on earth are they up to? I won't forgive them anymore. After that, I went to my in-laws' house, where both my mother-in-law and father-in-law were surprised to hear my story. Although my mother-in-law usually had a somewhat unpleasant way of speaking, she wasn't inherently malicious. Perhaps she was just not good at socializing. My father-in-law, despite giving off an intimidating impression, seemed like a good person at heart. So that's what happened. I'm sorry, Remy. It's okay. Because of you, I thought Taylor and Kashik were in danger. I'm really sorry. No, it's fine. They probably lied to both you and me.
Even so, what a ridiculous story. If that's true, those two are idiots.
Yeah, I was quite surprised too.
Well, they'll probably come back eventually, and when they do, let's give them a piece of our minds.
Several days later, my husband and son returned home, acting as if nothing happened. Since I had received a prior notice, I pretended to be calm. As they were much later than initially planned, my husband started making excuses.
Oh, we decided to climb other mountains too, so we changed the plans last minute. Right, Kashik? Exactly, we'd become addicted to mountain climbing. So, we climbed a lot. And we even went to hot springs afterward. Ha ha ha, we've become very healthy. It feels so refreshing. I feel so refreshed. We made some great memories.
Well, I guess you did something bad, felt refreshed, and made good memories. You were conducting some suspicious seminar overseas.
Why would you say that?
You held a volunteer event to help underprivileged children in the Philippines or something, right? And you organized a questionable seminar in a high-end tower condo in Salcedo.
Well.
And you were recruiting interpreters who could speak English and Tagalog, right? My friend accidentally applied because she thought it was a legitimate opportunity. She has a friend who is half Filipino and fluent in both languages. She works as a freelance interpreter through crowdsourcing. She applied for the job after seeing it, but as she listened to the details, she found it suspicious. Apparently, they asked her to transfer $15,000 as membership fees. She wondered why an interpreter had to pay such fees.
That's the person who backed out at the end, right, Isa?
Yes, you nailed it. Isa is my friend. My husband, who is a company employee, had mentioned wanting to start a business before. It seems he came up with the idea of a fraudulent business. He pretended to conduct charity work in the Philippines and recruited online interpreters, but it was full of suspicion. My friend Isa, being half Filipino and fluent in both English and Tagalog, applied for the job thinking she could contribute to her mother's home country. However, when they asked her for a substantial membership fee up front, she felt uneasy and reached out to her Filipino friend, Andy. Isa had lived in the Philippines until elementary school, so she had many friends there. Andy, who could speak some languages, helped her investigate the strange seminar my husband and son were organizing. It was hearsay, but the general idea was as follows.
Thank you all for sympathizing with our cause. If you want to donate more, please register on my account and transfer the funds to the account afterward. We accept donations starting from $500. Thanks to your support, we can help the underprivileged children. Andy, thanks for volunteering. You can leave now. See you, Andy. Be sure to join us in our business again.
So, Andy, who heard the suspicious story from my husband and son, informed Isa, who then tipped me off about it. The victims were apparently mostly Americans who, wanting to do something for underprivileged children, paid $1,500 in advance. Moreover, there were about 50 of them, totaling a whopping $75,000. There was a possibility they might send more money after returning home, increasing the amount of damages. That foolish son of mine. I won't forgive him. Because of you saying that you were invited by Remy for mountain climbing, I believed it. I ended up hurling abuses at Remy since you didn't come back.
Mom. Kaushik. Despite being a university student, what on earth are you doing? There's something wrong with your head. Grandpa. Why are you here? I knew you'd come back, so I was hiding, waiting for you.
I had contacted my in-laws as soon as my husband called me, and I had them come to the house. I felt sorry for them, but I wanted to surprise my husband and son, so I had them hide in the closet. The husband and son began to panic, offering embarrassing excuses.
But we held the seminar overseas. Therefore, US laws don't apply. Yeah. We didn't commit any crimes in America. So, we shouldn't be held accountable.
Well, didn't you extort money from Americans in the US with prepayments, and later, while abroad, ask them to pay more upon returning? Wouldn't US laws apply in that case? Even if you committed a crime over there, you might be held responsible individually. Well, I'm not an expert, but either way, what you did was wrong. Why are you guys trying to justify it?
But we had no choice. I ran out of money.
What?
No matter how much you earn as a doctor, I thought if you found out I spent all the money and went broke, you'd divorce me.
Why did you end up going broke?
We went to nightclubs together, and seriously, the money ran out.
What?
We got too into it, and it was really tough.
It turned out that the foolish husband and son spent so much money at nightclubs that they ended up broke. Come to think of it, I had been feeling distant lately, and even when I tried to hold hands, I was rejected. They must have been fawning over young girls, giving them lots of gifts. The thought of a 45-year-old man engaging in such behavior with young and beautiful girls disgusted me. Moreover, it wasn't just a simple employee-customer relationship. They had developed romantic feelings and were doing various things outside the club. Astonishingly, both the husband and son had impregnated their favorite girls. It seemed that they had to earn money for hospitalization and child support, leading them to the idea of a fraudulent business. At this point, I couldn't help but think that their heads were in the clouds, and they must be exceptionally happy. I was disgusted with my husband and son, who confessed everything.
You idiots. What the hell have you done? You're no longer my son. Don't be so mad. I didn't do anything wrong. Remy is to blame for neglecting us and always working.
What?
You always say you're working, leaving the house late at night, right? That's why I got fed up.
But, didn't you marry me knowing I'm a surgeon? I'm working hard for the family and the patients. It's terrible. You probably knew I wouldn't be able to go mountain climbing because I've been busy with surgeries lately. Did you foresee from the beginning that I wouldn't be able to go?
Oh, yeah. I invited you just in case, trying to hide it from you. Well, it's not mountain climbing, though. You're always busy with work. Yeah, you don't care about us.
Wait a minute. You're the one who repeated a year and dares to say such things. I'm the one paying your extra tuition.
So what?
I won't pay the tuition anymore. If you want to graduate from college, figure it out yourself.
No, don't do that.
Don't come to me only when you need money. Ask your dad, then.
I can't. I got fired from the company.
What?
Actually, I was accused of harassing a young female employee, and I got fired.
Another shocking revelation came out. This foolish husband had already been fired from his job. So that's why he could stay overseas for an extended period without any worries. Spending money recklessly at nightclubs, impregnating girls, getting fired from work for harassment. It was giving me a headache. How could someone make such foolish decisions? This statement angered my mother-in-law, and things took a turn for the worse. She scolded my husband loudly and began packing his belongings in their bedroom. You're already dumped by Remy. Live around here or something? Idiot.
Wait, Mom, what are you doing?
I'm organizing your stuff. Can't you see? Look, is this fine?
Wait.
EW, you were going to such places. Disgusting.
Stop it.
You scumbag. You won't be allowed in our home again. Disappear from our sight.
That's right. Kneel down and apologize to Remy first. Then never show yourself in front of us again. W8.
Kashik, apologize too.
Come on, Granny.
Stop whining and kneel down. Thus, my husband and son knelt down facing me. They were sobbing, and it felt as if I were bullying them, which I disliked. I loved my husband, and I had taken care of my son. However, it was true that I couldn't give them much attention due to my busy job. But that didn't justify their criminal actions. I might have some points to reflect on, but I couldn't forgive my husband and son for committing crimes and destroying our family. My husband and son left the house with their belongings. I'm sorry for that time. I was truly out of my mind. No problem.
Sorry for jumping to conclusions. Be happy from now on.
Sure. Well, we'll be going. And so, my in-laws left. I was left alone in the house, wondering what to do next. First, I had to get a divorce from my husband. I didn't think I could rebuild anything with such a husband. After the divorce, I decided to relinquish my role as a parent and let go of my son. If my efforts in love didn't get through to him, then he wasn't worth worrying about. He was already an adult, and at this point, anything I did wouldn't change anything. After the divorce, my ex-husband paid me alimony for his infidelity. Being broke, having impregnated girls, and having lost his job, he borrowed money and gave it to me. My son dropped out of college and became a part-timer. Since he had always hated studying and even repeated a year, I thought it was fine for him not to go. Then, my ex-husband and son were sued for fraud due to their deceptive actions, facing serious charges. I felt a bit sorry for them, considering the substantial amount of the damages, around $100,000. The victims were probably furious, and while it might be wrong to be deceived, the ones taking advantage of goodwill were worse. I was relieved that my friend Isa wasn't fooled. I decided to forget about my ex-husband and son, focusing on being a surgeon. This story may have been quite dramatic, but life goes on. How was this story for you? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Well then, let's meet again in the next video.